to Couched in Color with Dr. Alfiee. I'm your host, Dr. Alfiee. Today is the beginning of Mental Health Awareness Month, and we want to take this opportunity to bring you a whole series of shows with some amazing guests. Some people you recognize from the public eye, some people you recognize from social media, and some people will be new to you, and all of that's awesome. Our goal here at Couched in Color is always to bring you the latest and greatest and exciting and new, maybe undiscovered information about the mental health of teens and young adults and the families and communities that love them. So stay with us. We know you're really going to enjoy today's guest. Many of you will recognize his last name from a very famous family, but he's also an amazing person in his own right and has a really powerful story to share with us. So stay with us. We know you'll enjoy it, and we also know you'll learn a lot and be moved. Thanks for joining us and welcome.
So it is my pleasure, my honor, really, I am truly honored to welcome Mr. Tony Cornelius to the podcast. So I just want to say welcome to you, sir. Welcome to Couched in Color. And I know that my audience is really going to have a blast listening to you and learning from you as we have this conversation about mental health. So
well,
start,
Dr. let me say this up front, and
yes.
I'm a fan of yours. And since we met for the first time, it's been like I really appreciate who you are and the kind of things that you are involved in at this time. And I'm honored to be here.
Oh, thank you so much for saying that. I really appreciate it. I really do appreciate it. So, if you would introduce yourself to our audience and just tell them a little bit about you. And the most important thing, I think, obviously, other than just you being a cool person, is what your investment is and experience around mental illness and mental health, especially for Black folks and communities of color.
I guess, when people ask to introduce yourself, it's always weird for me because some people know me and some people don't know me. But I'm from Chicago, Illinois. My father started Soul Train, Mr. Don Cornelius, and I've been his lightning bolt since he left here in 2012.
Yes.
So when that happened, I just became a soldier in that sense when it came to suicide and mental health. Currently, I'm a TV producer. I've followed his footsteps. There's a show on BET called American Soul that we're very proud of.
Yes.
It's airing March 27th.
Okay.
I'm sorry, May 27th.
Okay, cool.
For the second season. And since that time and before, I've been involved in television and film. I also host the Soul Train cruise. So I've been making myself very busy. I also started the Don Cornelius Foundation after his passing, so.
I did not realize that about the foundation. Tell us a little bit about the foundation and the work.
Well, I started the foundation back in 2013, I believe, late 2012, early 2013, and it was actually brought on by Stevie Wonder. I was really down at the time when that happened, and he gave me a personal call because he and my father were very close, and he just basically said, Tony, do something about it, and from that conversation, I began to reach out to grassroots organizations like yourself, people who were really involved in suicide prevention and mental health. And since then, we've been taking baby steps. We've done several events in the past, and currently we're still learning to reach out to those that are really on the ground floor doing the work,
Yeah. Oh, that is so important and so powerful because, for so many Black folks, we're just going to talk about Black folks because we Black. And in our community, suicide is definitely not something that I think we still have gotten to the point where we're able to kind of talk about. I won't say freely, but just even have any conversations about. Because I know when I talk to folks, this has been like forever. when you broach the conversation of mental illness, number one, but then when you talk about suicide, people just kind of clam up, you know, and you know what we say. I say it all the time. For us as Black people, we say those are white people problems. Like, Black people don't do that. Black people don't die by suicide. And I have a really close girlfriend who lost her son to suicide when he was 15 years old. And she and I have been working together for about 12, 13 years. And so I guess what my question is for you is, from your experience, what do you think those issues are that make it so difficult for us as Black people to be able to have these conversations? And I'm going to talk specifically about suicide. Why can't we talk about it?
Well, you know, that's a very interesting question. And I, you know, to be honest, I don't think we're the only ones
Okay.
that can't talk about it. However, I do think that when it comes to things that are extremely private within the Black community,
Yes.
we reach toward the church,
Yes.
and we talk to our pastors, and we talk to our friends and family, and we keep it inside, you know. And that's what I've noticed myself with my family and other family members that I'm familiar with, is that we keep it inside. I mean, it's just something that we don't discuss. It's always been, as I've talked about early on when I started the foundation, it's a veil of shame, so to speak. And it's something that we have to discuss, and that's one reason why I began to discuss it myself, openly, in different situations. I mean, people walked up to me and said, you know, it's unbelievable that you've been able to discuss it. So I think I was one of the few that actually came out and said, listen, my father committed suicide, and I want to talk about it. And it was a healing process for me personally, but everybody has their own way of dealing with it. So I mean, that's probably the best answer that I can give you at this time when it comes to as to why. I mean, I can only speak for myself as well.
Yeah, but I think it's a wonderful answer, because it really is the thing that you hit on. I don't think I had even thought about it. Is this idea is the veil of shame, right? Is that family members, extended family members, I don't know about your situation, but I know other families I've talked to, especially when they're come from communities of color, is people will say, like, they felt like they did something wrong, or they felt like they missed something, or they felt like, well, maybe if I had just done X, Y, and Z, this thing wouldn't have happened. And I don't know if you have any thoughts or words for people to help them understand that, from my perspective, what I say is, if somebody is struggling like this, and they're in that level of pain that they feel like the only way out is to die by suicide, sometimes there's really not much we can do, right? That, if they're in, and I say this as a mental health professional, as a licensed person, when somebody's in that frame of mind or in that state, they are in a tremendous amount of pain. And so the most that we can hope for is that, one, they don't complete it, right? And I think that what we also can hope for is to try to do everything we can to raise our own awareness, raise our own consciousness, so that we understand and recognize how we can contribute, how we can be supportive, how we can try to do the things to let the person know that we love and care about them. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about, extending this idea of the veil of shame, and what can we do? How can we be supportive of people?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because there's not a lot of people, I mean, especially those that are developing organizations like yourself.
Yes.
I'm also a board member of the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention.
Yes.
And, I've always struggled with the fact that if someone wants to leave this earth,
that's right.
It's very difficult to turn it around at times. Yes. It's because of the pain that you mentioned.
Right.
The point being that in my own situation, my father warned me several times. In other words, I got a phone call, and he said, Tony, I don't think I'm going to be here long. And getting that from a father, it's like, well, Dad, what are you saying? I mean, I don't understand what you're saying. It's just completely oblivious to what he was saying, because this was my father. This was my hero. This was somebody that I loved dearly.
Yes.
And just to say that, it's like, well, what are you saying?
Yes.
You know? And he said it a second time. And the second time I believed it. I believed something was going on. And on my visit to his home, before I got there, that's when it happened. And so sometimes I ask myself, could I have helped in some way? But I don't know if I could have. I think about that a lot. You know, I think about, could I have done something? But like you said, the pain that someone is involved in, we don't know what that is. I mean, I can look at you, you can look at me, I look happy, you look happy, but I don't really know what's going on inside of you, and you don't really know what's going on inside of me. Once we hang up, who knows, you know? But I mean, that's a simplification, so to speak, but it's real. It's real stuff, you know?
Yeah. You said a lot of things that are really important. One of them is that if a person is determined, right, you were brave, because I wasn't willing to say it, but if a person is determined, then there's really not much that you can do. So I don't want it to sound like it's inevitable. But I think, you know what I mean? But I think what we have to do is educate ourselves on this idea that, you know, that those are circumstances that people find themselves in.
Right. Well, you have to recognize it. I mean, and then they have a group of people who are attempters, you know,
Yes,
people
that's
who
right.
have attempted 2 and 3 and 4 times. I mean, you know, it's something that's it's hard to explain at times. You know,
Yes.
and we all have our thoughts. I mean, I personally have thoughts. I mean, it's like, I remember seeing this commercial years ago about this anti-cigarette smoking commercial.
Yes.
And a father sitting next to a tree, and his 2-3-year-old son is sitting there next to him, and he picks up a pack of cigarettes and opens it up, lights it up, and smokes it. And then the little boy picks up the pack and looks at it. And then they talk about like father, like son. Well, I'm saying that to say that sometimes we repeat things that our parents do. We learn things that our parents do. And it's like, well, if he could do it, if he could solve his pain this way, then I could solve my pain that way as well. So, I mean, it's those kinds of struggles that we deal with at times that we learn from our parents, or we learn from others, you know? So that those are things that I concern myself with as well. And I'm sure other families concern themselves with, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. And I think the idea is that one of the most important things is the awareness piece. So it's sort of like with the smoking analogy. If you see that the child is picking up and patterning him or herself after the parent, picking up the smoking, then the idea becomes that's an opportunity for education, right? In that moment, right? Or that's an opportunity for, like you were describing, for that parent to stop their behavior and say, okay, this is something my child is watching. Maybe I need to, you know what I mean, not do this myself. So, of course, you don't stop immediately, but that may put you on the path to, I got to do better because my child is watching me. And so I think, you know, for me, what that really lends itself to is having these conversations about prevention. Like, how do we begin to have conversations at the front end to talk about suicide, to talk about suicide prevention, to talk about mental health, to talk about the things that can contribute to somebody, you know, feeling all that pain and thinking and feeling that the only way out is I just can't be here anymore. So,
well, you know, it also reminds me of I was doing a talk at an event on mental health and suicide prevention, and after my conversation, I shared my story.
Okay.
And a woman walked up to me with tears in her eyes and said, you know, I thank you for sharing that, because I was considering it. And after seeing your pain, I just don't want my children to go through that. You know, so that was like something that I could not have dreamed of.
Yes.
You know, and if I could help one person in that situation, then I've done what I was supposed to do. So the point being is that, you know, I've run into all kinds of situations and heard all kinds of of things that you would never believe when it comes to the feelings that people are having within themselves, you know. So
Yes.
It's a constant turnover. It's a constant learning. I mean, it's a situation where I'm still learning
Yes.
to talk to people. I'm still learning to help in some way.
Yes.
And again, if I can help one person, then I think I've done what I was supposed to do.
Oh, wow. That's a beautiful story. Yeah, and you don't realize just by sharing your story openly,
Absolutely.
that in and of itself can be prevention.
Absolutely.
Right. And so wow, that gives me chills just thinking that somebody could, would come up to you and say, just because you were open,
Right.
you helped me. Like in this immediate moment, you helped me. So I don't have to feel this anymore. So I think you're right that there is so much power to the story and sharing the story. So I'm wondering, this is just something that came to me. I'm wondering if that informs the work that you do, like professionally, like so in your media and television and the crews and all that kind of thing. Do you feel like what you just shared, your advocacy around suicide prevention, like being open and speaking publicly about your own experiences, does that in any way inform the work that you do?
Well, if I'm understanding your question, I think based on my experience, what happened to me has changed my life completely, all over. In other words, my feeling about suicide prior to my father committing suicide was that suicide was for weak people, who couldn't handle life, and people who couldn't stand up for what they believe in. I mean, I just had a very narrow view of it.
Yes.
As a lot of people do when they're not affected by something. You know, like, it's just like the coronavirus. Let's use that as an example.
Yes.
People who don't have it are saying, well, I'm good, or I'm okay, and I'm not afraid of it. But until you get sick, that's when you really understand how serious it is.
That's right.
And so I just use that as an example to suicide as well. You don't really understand it until someone in your family is affected by it. So if I'm understanding your question, everything I do now is based on my experience that I had with my father in suicide.
Wow. Yes. Yeah. I appreciate you answering the question so openly, and I think that even if we're not consciously thinking about it, like you said, because it creates a fundamental, like a seismic shift in our lives, it really does sort of feed into everything that we do. So I was also thinking specifically about having watched, I'm not all the way through it, but watching the first season of the show, American Soul, and how it's so focused on, like, sort of, I feel like there are multiple storylines, but there's your dad's story and your family, and then there's the kids, like the kids who are dancing on the show. And I'm thinking about, and they're like kids, right? Those actors and actresses, they're amazing, but they really are playing like teenagers and emerging adults.
Right.
And just thinking about different experiences those young people had on the show. Think about how in that period of time, we didn't have conversations about mental health. Right? But clearly the experiences that people were having, especially around race, right? Being traumatized around racism and discrimination. And I imagine if they would have had an opportunity back then to have somebody say, it's okay that you feel horrible after this really racist experience. Somebody gonna pull the gun on you, or you know what I mean? Or somebody's calling you out of your name and throwing stuff at you. It is okay for you to go and take care of yourself in that context. And so for me, what your show and shows like it, what it does by being real honest about, showing people's experience, is it gives me an opportunity in my work to then go and share with people. Look, a lot of our young people are activists, and they're all about, Black Lives Matter, and they're all about social justice. And I think I'm all for that. At the same time, my wish and my hope is that they will also know how to take care of themselves when they're being bombarded with all of the sometimes pushback that can come from being an activist or from being a pioneer, right? Because those kids on Soul Train, they were pioneers. I mean, I grew up watching that. That was like, I think it was Saturdays. That was every Saturday, sitting in front of that TV, because I saw people who looked like me with the hair and everything, right? Dark skin, light skin, whatever it was. And so for me, I think it's really powerful to see infused in the storytelling these real life experiences that even resonate with us now. And I'm wondering if you all in the work were even conscious that that's how it hits for people like us. Like, we can see the trauma and we can see what people are dealing with and we can see their emotional, sort of responses to it. I'm just curious about that.
Well, that's it's interesting you mentioned that, because you have a bird's eye view of it because you're involved in it.
Right.
And many times mental health issues sneak up on us.
Yes.
We just don't know it's happening, and then all of a sudden we're in it.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Whether it be loss of job or loss of relationship or loss of marriage or loss of friends for whatever reason, mental health sneaks up on us, and you are looking at this from a professional viewpoint.
Yeah.
You can see why this happened or why that person is struggling. So when it comes to storylines, I mean, we haven't delved into anything like that, but I think that's a really good opportunity now that you mentioned it to touch those points at times, because that's exactly what I believe what happened with my father. He wanted it so badly. It was so difficult.
Yep.
Growing up as a Black man, dealing with all kinds of different people, financial issues, just relationships, friendships. I mean, it all becomes this big problem.
Yes.
And you wake up one morning and something's wrong with your mind.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? I mean,
yes.
The line is just so thin.
Yes.
It's just so thin. It's so thin you can't even see it.
Yeah.
Between sane and insane, and I use that respectfully.
Yes, of course.
And not disrespectfully.
Of course.
Just as a point of reference.
Of course. Of course.
So we just don't realize just how important it is to keep a healthy mind, just like we do a healthy body.
That's right.
And I work on that constantly. I actually, I talked to my brother yesterday because we were talking about business or something, and I guess my voice was a little stern.
Mm-hmm.
And I called him the next day and I said, "Brother, did I say anything that hurt you? And if I did, I want to apologize, because I just felt like you were getting some energy from me that just was not comfortable."
Yes.
So I did that because I try to practice with my own head.
Yes.
And I just want to make sure that his head is okay as well. So I mean, but these are things that I've learned over time and because of my experience. So
yes.
Everybody has their own, that walk at their own cadence,
Wow. That's amazing that, you have had the experience. And I have this mentor, he passed away in last August unexpectedly. His name was Dr. Carl Bell. He's a big time psychiatrist in Chicago. And what he talked about was what he really values about Black people is that sometimes we can take really bad situations and pull something good out of those situations and use that to propel us forward. And he called it going from learned helplessness. So when you, like you were describing, all these things are coming at you constantly and it's just sort of pounding on you and it can weigh you down and really put you in a bad headspace. And, hopefully that doesn't result in suicide. But if it does, for the survivors, he was speaking specifically about one of my friends and her experience. What they can do with that is, like you said, walk in their own lane, walk at their own pace, but they can take that, what could be helplessness long term, and they can turn that into helpfulness for somebody else. So you described what you were able to do for that woman at that event. You described what you were able to do for your own brother to come back and just heal something, right? Even if you didn't not knowing necessarily whether it impacted him or not, just the idea that you think about it consciously and say, okay, all right, let me try to like fix this. And so that's the goal, is for us to grow and learn and have an opportunity to understand ourselves in a different way. And, you know, it's unfortunate that sometimes it takes a really tragic event like that. But what I'm encouraged by is that you and people like you have taken the opportunity to allow it to help you grow. And so I just want to, you know, say, I feel like that's a wonderful place to sort of shift toward the end, because that thing that you said about going at your own pace, I'm like, I'm all over that, right? I got to stay in my lane, because this is my lane, right? I'm trying to get from my A to B, and I don't necessarily need to have that influence by anybody else. And so for what you're doing with your foundation in honor of your dad, with the board for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, where you can reflect the needs of people who look like us, right? Because we all need somebody at those tables to represent, you know what I mean, to represent us. So yeah.
And
so
that's why I'm happy to be on the board. I'm one of the few black and brown folks on the board.
Yeah.
And my mission is to get them more involved in the diversity part of suicide prevention, because it's not just white folks, it's black folks too, you know, and brown folks and blue folks. I mean, we all have those things that we struggle with. And if those that want to visit the Don Cornelius Foundation, there's a website, theDonCorneliusFoundation.com.
Good.
And you know, it's a very interesting website, and I think people will really understand just how real it is. At the same time, as I say about the American Foundation Suicide Prevention, I did a piece yesterday that'll be part of their social media, where I did send out a message from home. And one of the important things was that you're not alone. You're not alone. Mental health is something that we really should pay attention to, and just be open to talk to someone about it. And it's easy for us to say. You know, I mean, I was talking to my daughter, which was very interesting, creatively, and she said, "Well, Dad, are you also speaking to that girl in some small town who thinks that you don't relate to her?" And it was very interesting that she said that, because you just never know.
Right.
But the point is, you know, if you're touching someone, you may not be able to touch everyone, but if you're touching someone, you've done what you're supposed to do, because you can't touch everybody at the same time.
No, you cannot. Yes.
My father gave me a word years ago called ubiquitous, and that's being at the same place, everywhere at the same place. Nobody can do that.
That's
you know.
Right. That's right.
So I think about that a lot, and that's something that I work on, and I try to understand that you can't be every place at the same time. And if you're helping at one person or two or three persons, then you've done the work. You've done the work.
Thank you so much. That's a wonderful way for us to end. I want to reiterate what you said about the Don Cornelius Foundation, and people can find you on the web. I want to reiterate that American Soul, the second season, is coming out on, you said May 27th? May 22nd. 27th. All right.
And then lastly, I want to say to you, I think there was a question you said, well, who inspires me, who's involved in mental health?
Yes.
And I'm going to say Dr. Alfiee Breland-Noble. That's what I'm going to say.
You're so sweet. Thank you. Thank you so much, Tony Cornelius. It has been an honor and a pleasure to have you on. And I will look for your work with AFSP on social media, so I can tell everybody I know him and he's cool and we friends, and so I know cool people. I'm cool because I know cool people. And we got to get through coronavirus, because I got to come on that cruise.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I got to do this cruise. So thank you so much again, and I'm wishing you and your family all the best, and take care.
Thank you.
So there you have it, a very powerful story from Mr. Tony Cornelius of the Cornelius family. We all know his father, Mr. Don Cornelius, from Soul Train fame. And it was a really powerful opportunity to hear about Mr. Cornelius's journey along with that of his family. And the work that he's doing now around raising awareness around mental health and suicide prevention in the Black community and in communities of color in general. So I hope that you will have an opportunity to go check out his page for his foundation, the Don Cornelius Foundation, on the web, as well as check out a little of his work that he's doing with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. So it really was my honor to have Mr. Cornelius as my guest. And what I want to share with you in closing is that I hope that this has been a very moving and powerful experience for you, and that you've had an opportunity to learn some things just like I did as a part of this episode. So for May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month, I want to ask you to do a couple things for us. We hope that you will go to our YouTube channel, Couched in Color with Dr. Alfiee, and subscribe. We also hope that you will join us and find us anywhere you get your podcast fix, because you know it's portable. You can take us with you. You can listen to us while you wash the dishes or just hang out, or when you get tired of watching television. It'll give you a little change of pace, and you may even learn something at the same time. So please find us on Apple Podcasts, Libsyn, SoundCloud, wherever you get your podcast fix. The final thing I want to say is something that I always share with you, my wonderful audience, and that is that I want to wish you lots of love, lots of light, and my hope is that it is always informed by good, culturally relevant science. Thanks for joining us, and take care.